Hello everyone! Today we're going to be talking about ancient Mesopotamia and Persia. So to begin, where is that? We're talking about the ancient Near East, so the area of the world that we today associate most with conflict and oil was actually the cradle of civilization. Mesopotamia is what we're particularly looking at, and the Greek translation of the word Mesopotamia means literally the land between two rivers, namely the Tigris River and the Euphrates River. You see how it's kind of cradled between the two rivers? This is often called the cradle of civilization, because in ancient Mesopotamia we see the earliest known settled civilizations. So, modern-day countries that make up this region today include Iraq and Iran, as well as other countries that we often associate with a lot of conflict. And you'll see that this history of conflict is not new. It's part of a long tradition of conflict in this area. This is an incredibly important period of human history because it marks the end of prehistory. We see people settling down and creating civilizations and cities that are, in almost all respects, incredibly modern when we look at their infrastructure. And we also see the beginning of writing. The earliest written script is called Kanaya Form, and this is a writing tablet that shows an example of what Kanaya Form looks like. Interestingly enough, a lot of the earliest examples of writing actually record trade, and many of them record trade of beer or of meat. So people were using this to keep track of business. Lots of the cuneiform writing that exists today is on clay tablets, and we also see cuneiform carved into stone. Cuneiform was used in Mesopotamia, Persia, and Ugarit, but these are all ancient Middle Eastern civilizations. We also see examples of it even found in ancient Egypt. Here's another vocab term I want you guys to know. Ziggurat. It's an important one. A ziggurat is a temple, and it's on top of a tower. So the tower itself is stepped, and then the temple is placed on top of the stepped tower. You can think of it kind of like a precursor to the pyramids of ancient Egypt, which you're probably familiar with. And here's an example of a ziggurat. Now, ziggurats are typically made out of brick, so a lot of them are pretty fairly decayed, what exists from the times when they were first built in ancient Mesopotamia. I've included here a picture of American soldiers walking on a ziggurat, and if you speak to people who've been deployed, many of them will have seen a lot of the art that comes from this time period. When people began settling down in these ancient civilizations, one important shift that we see is that religion becomes more organized in the sense of organized religion as we know it today. So we see distinct deities being worshipped, and we can track their worship throughout time. One very important Middle Eastern deity is Anana. I'm including here a sculpture of her face and a bas-relief sculpture of her. And lots of the earliest poems that we still have in existence are written to her, and a lot of the artwork from this time period commemorates her. She was a goddess of fertility, so she protected the crops. She was a goddess of love and lust, and she was also a goddess of war. And these three things are very, very important to the early civilizations of this era because these people were farmers, and they also experienced a lot of political turmoil. I have here a question on this slide too that I want you guys to consider. How did settled civilization change people's relationship to religion? what does it mean, and why, for the first time, do you think, and this is just a rhetorical question, why do you think we see now such a proliferation of human forms and no longer an emphasis on just animals in art? Of course, all of these changes are reflected in the changes in lifestyle. Here's an important vocab term, bas-relief, which is from the Italian, basso rilievo, which means low relief. Anything that is carved in very, very low relief, meaning only a tiny bit higher than the background, can be referred to as a bas-relief. And many bas-reliefs are almost flat, like this one that we see here in the Warka vase. The Warka vase is a very important object. It's larger than you'd think. It's 3 feet tall, and it's made of alabaster, which is a hard stone. You see in it a carved narrative in bas-relief, and a narrative is a story. The story here is of people coming to give objects and offerings to the goddess Anana. Why is this important? Because we're seeing for the first time objects that foreground humans, that have a strong sense of narrative, so a strong story, and were ritual objects that we can actually understand. We have written records of the kind of rituals that were performed to worship the goddess Anana, and she required a lot of sacrifice, and in many cases even ritual prostitution. Remember that this is coming from an area that was that still is in a state of incredible conflict, and so here I have a excerpt from the Times of the account of the theft of the Warka vase. Here, I'll read it aloud for you so you can imagine what actually happened to this object. As they struggled to lift a large object wrapped in a blanket out of the boot, the American guards on the gate raised their weapons. For a moment, a priceless 5,000-year-old vase, thought to have been lost in looting after the fall of Baghdad, seemed about to meet its end, but one of the men peeled back the blanket to reveal carved alabaster pieces that were clearly something extraordinary. 3 feet high and weighing 600 pounds intact, this was the sacred vase of Warka, regarded by experts as one of the most precious of all the treasure taken during the looting that shocked the world in the chaos following the fall of Baghdad. Broken in antiquity and stuck together, it was once again in pieces. So this little excerpt is talking about the recovery of the Warka vase. You can see the image on the upper left shows how it was stolen from the museum and it was returned. But a lot of things were stolen during the fall of Baghdad and continue to be stolen now in the conflicts that are ongoing in the Middle East and will never be recovered. There are a lot of firsts during this time period. One of the more notable firsts is the first record of a known poet, in this case a female priestess named Enheduanna, and much of her poetry was written to the goddess Anana, and this little coin medallion in bas-relief shows her bringing offerings to the goddess. An important vocab term here, hierarchy of scale. We'll see hierarchy of scale used throughout many cultures, and it's a visual technique in which the most important thing or person is depicted as larger than everything else. So in this case, Naram Sin, the ruler, this guy here, is much bigger than everybody else, and so you therefore know he's important because of his size. Another very important first from this time period, the first written law code. It's called the Stele of Hammurabi. A stele is a large obelisk-shaped object, like this one here, and this is quite tall. It's a little bit over 7 feet tall, and on it is recorded the first known written law code. The most famous law on here, you might have heard of it before, is an eye for an eye. And these laws are pretty strict. They record what's to be done if somebody steals a sheep or rapes a woman, and in many cases the verdict is death. We have here on the top the ruler Hammurabi, depicted standing, receiving the laws from the god Shamash. So it's not only a government that's ruled by laws, it's also a religious government. In other words, a theocracy. And here's a close-up. You can see him receiving the law codes. Now we see that they're not on the same plane. They're not exactly equals, but Hammurabi isn't that far removed from the god Shamash. And the idea of viewing rulers as semi-divine is a very long-standing tradition in this region. Here is an image of what a royal complex might have looked like during this time. So you can see it's heavily fortified and includes a ziggurat for worship. But the fortification is what I really want you to note, because this was a time period that was full of so much conflict. And warfare and protection was first and foremost in most rulers' minds. At the gates of many cities and citadels were included these lovely sculptures of Lama Su. This here is a Lama Su. And a Lama Su is a mythical creature that has the body of a bull, in some cases the body of a lion, and wings, and this horned helmet that shows divinity. If you look at this image from the front, you see that it has only 2 legs, but when you view it from the side, you see that you can see the legs moving in profile view. So the creature was supposed to be carved with the illusion that it was always moving forward and always intent to protect the city and the gate from any intruders. They're very large. Here's an image of their scale. I include this bas-relief as an image I want you to spend a little bit of time with, because I think that it displays a lot of important characteristics of this region very well. It's an image from the palace of Ashurbanipal, and Ashurbanipal was a powerful ruler. And this is him here on the chariot. He's hunting lions. And lions, in this time period and still in the world today, were considered to be an image of power, especially royal power. It was typical for kings to have lions bred within the palace and then hunted and killed for sport as a display of power. This is a really very carefully and beautifully made bas-relief. You can see the attention that's lavished on the details of strength, not only of the ruler but of the lions as well, but also the incredible pain. That the lion that's jumping up towards the ruler just seems to be howling in pain. And look at this body of the lioness that's crumpled and viciously killed. These were cultures that emphasized power, strength, victory, and warfare, which is interesting because these are also the earliest civilizations. So it's strange to think that war is and continues to be such a key point to civilization, but I guess maybe it's not that strange after all, right? It's a constant throughout human history. This is one of my favorite images. This here is the Ishtar Gate. And the Ishtar Gate, when it was constructed, was considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. It guarded the ancient city of Babylon, which is in present-day Iraq, and it's made of bricks that are glazed with faience, which is a very special kind of paint, and in the sun it appears to glitter. The gate was covered with images of Marduk, which is a dragon god from this region, and with bulls, these ancient, very larger-than-life bulls. And this gate was actually built in 7 parts, and not all of the parts are constructed today, because the gate itself was removed brick by German archaeologists and placed inside of a museum in Berlin. It was essentially stolen from present-day Iraq, which is an ongoing debate. So it doesn't exist in its full form today, because part of it was too large to be reconstructed in the museum and is actually sitting in the basement of the museum. But I'm including here an image of the largest gate that is assembled. And if you want to see it, you have to go, strangely enough, not to Iraq, but to Berlin. And to finish up, I wanted to read all of you an excerpt from one of Enheduanna's poems about the goddess Anana. This is, again, one of the earliest poems in existence. Okay, here goes. I'll try and do a dramatic reading. Queen of all given powers, unveiled, clear light, unfailing woman, wearing brilliance, cherished in heaven and earth, chosen, sanctified in heaven, you, grand in your adornments, crowned with your beloved goodness, rightfully you are high priestess, your hand seize the 7 fixed powers, my queen of fundamental forces, guardian of essential cosmic sources, you lift up the elements, bind them to your hands, gather in your powers, press them to your breast. Vicious dragon you spew, venom poisons the land. Like the storm god, you howl, grain wilts on the ground, swollen flood rushing down the mountain. You are Anana, supreme in heaven and earth.